bye weeks starting up in week 5 of the NFL season. We're going to help you guys out, get prepared for those a little bit, how to handle those, who are players that may be not worth holding on through those bye weeks, who are some players to pick up to help get you prepared. And we're going to talk about a little bit beating the waiver wire, some juicy matchups for next week, guys you can pick up now that can help you out in a week from now. Welcome to the ADP, the Average Dudes podcast. I am your average dude host, Matt Mormann, and today that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the week 5 slate a little bit here and find some players that you can pick up now who either could have big opportunities next week, guys who maybe could run into some good matchups here coming up soon, and guys to help you get through those bye weeks. So, first things first, let's talk about those buys. On bye next week are the Cleveland Browns, the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that means you're going to be out without quite a few wide receivers. Think about those teams here. That includes guys like Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer, and Quentin Johnson from the Chargers, Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore has maybe been a guy you can use for these past couple of weeks. The Tampa Bay guys, Mike Evans, he's been awesome. He won't be there for you in week 5. Same with Chris Godwin. The Seahawks receivers, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, a guy you haven't played yet, or hopefully you haven't played yet, but you've been holding on to him. Also, of course, DK Metcalf. So a lot of wide receivers are going to be in demand on this one. Also, at quarterback, you're going to be without Deshaun Watson, Justin Herbert, Geno Smith, one of our streaming options of Baker Mayfield. At running back, that means you're not going to have that Jerome Ford you just paid a bunch of money for. You're not going to have Austin Eckler if he's back from injury. You're not going to have Josh Kelly if he's not. You're not going to have Kenneth Walker, and you're not going to have Rachaad White. So there's a lot of very fantasy relevant players on these 4 teams that you're going to be without in week 5 in your matchup. So what do? Well, first, let's take a look at those teams, and I'll give you a few guys here that I think you can drop from those teams if you're not using them in week 4. I would go ahead and look, if you picked up Joshua Palmer, if you aren't using him in week 4, I would go ahead and drop him before Sunday. Do it on Sunday if you can. If there's a guy that we're going to talk about here who's on the waiver wire, I would anticipate he will not be picked up at this point in the week. You can wait. You can push this thing all the way till Sunday, so that way your opponent doesn't pick up Joshua Palmer and potentially use him against you. Same goes for Joshua Kelly. If Eckler's back, then this is a no-brainer. But even if he's not, I don't love Joshua Kelly this week. He really let us down last week, and I can see myself not playing him this week. And then I don't have him available in week 5, and by week 6, fully expect Austin Eckler would be back by then. They do have a nice matchup here in week 4 against the Vegas Raiders. Another guy, I would not want to drop him on Friday or even on Saturday, depending on how your league works, because I don't want him playing against me this week, because there's a good match against the Vegas Raiders. If Austin Eckler is out, he probably is a low-end RB2 or a flex option. But if you're not using Joshua Kelly this week, it's another guy you can drop. Also, Sean Tucker, the handcuff out there in Tampa, he's the guy I would go ahead and dump now, because even if Rachaad White were to be injured in this game, knock on wood, we never want injuries, but it's a fact, it's a reality. We never want those injuries, but they can happen. And if they do for Tampa, you would have that extra bye week in there for Rachaad White to potentially get better. You have to hold him through a bye week. I don't think it's worth it for Tucker. I do think it's worth it for the Cleveland tandem of Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. I also think it's totally worth it for Seattle backup Zach Charbonnet. I would not be dropping him. Obviously, you're holding on to those starting running backs. The other guys I would drop from these teams are all the tight ends, as well as Baker Mayfield. Unless you're planning on using Baker this week. No, you're not using Baker this week. They're at New Orleans. So, yeah, Baker Mayfield, kick him to the curb. All the tight ends on these teams. I would probably go ahead and drop them all now and pick up different streamers for this week anyway, most likely. But you definitely can drop them all during their buys. Okay, so let's go to who you're going to replace these guys with. Let's start with quarterback. And it gets a little tricky here. I should have done this a day earlier because my 2 favorites are probably the 2 guys who played last night. They're not available in a ton of leagues, but they are out there in some. So I just want to mention Jared Goff. He's not out there in as many, but there are some leagues where Jared Goff is available. He has Carolina next week. That's a really nice matchup for him. Then you've got Jordan Love. He's at Vegas next week. I love that for him as well. I think that could be a really great bounce back game for him. Jordan Love's fantasy day was kind of bailed out by the rushing touchdown last night. But all in all, not a great day for Jordan Love, as my Google Chrome tab is not wanting to cooperate with me. There we go. We're going to go ahead and make that one smaller. We're going to move that one over. Sorry about that. Okay. Next up, among the options on the waiver wire to replace those quarterbacks, again, we're missing 3 guys who are kind of – Herbert's a high-end starter. But we're also missing 2 other guys you've probably been starting with Geno and Deshaun Watson. I'm looking at Brock Purdy as a pretty good option for next week. He's got Dallas. Trayvon Diggs being out has really changed my mindset on that Dallas defense. I think that makes them a good enough matchup for a good enough quarterback with Brock Purdy. Also, if you're on the lower end of things, you're getting real desperate, it's actually kind of a hard week to pick up quarterbacks to play for week 5. Again, each league is going to be different, so go check your waiver wire, see what's out there. I'm going to use quarterbacks who are mostly available in more than about 35 to 40% of leagues. So usually about like that 75% ownership is maybe my cutoff on where I'm not going to mention them. But 2 kind of lower end options here, and it's going to feel a little ugly here. Desmond Ridder against Houston and Zach Wilson. He's going to have Denver. So I don't feel great about those, but desperate times do call for desperate measures. I would much rather find a way to swing a trade for Justin Fields or Joe Burrow, even though I don't love those guys at the moment, especially Fields. They've got some pretty easy matchups next week, even if it's a short-term play. If you can just buy very cheaply and very low on those 2 guys to get you through those bye weeks and then maybe trade them afterwards, that might be the way to try to approach things. And then on the higher end of things, some good matchups are out there for some guys who are already very much rostered. You know, Mahomes has Minnesota. Tua's got the Giants. Richardson has the Titans. These are guys that aren't available. So a lot of those good matchups are with guys who are already on rosters. Let's shift over to running backs. First things first with running backs. I would much rather take a flyer on a handcuffed running back for a team who does not have their bye in week 5 than a team who does. I talked about Sean Tucker with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For example, I would rather have Zamir White on my roster right now, because if something were to lead to an opportunity for White, I can play him next week. If something leads to an opportunity for Sean Tucker, I would have to wait a second week. That's another week where that opportunity could then go away potentially. So I would go ahead and drop those guys for some handcuff running backs. Again, if you're not using them, in Josh Palmer's case, in Joshua Kelly's case, I would go ahead and grab some of those backup guys that we love what their opportunities could be in the case of an injury or an opportunity opening up in front of them. So a couple guys who in specifically week 5 do have good matchups, though, if you just need a guy to plug in and potentially play. Tyler Algier. He's not available in a ton of leagues, but a name I wanted to mention here. He's been getting dropped from time to time. He's a good handcuff behind Bijan, but we've also seen him get some usage. They have Houston next week, as did Desmond Ridder. I think that Algier could have a really nice game against Houston. Roshan Johnson's a guy I've talked about a couple times on the waiver wire show. You can check that one out from previously in the week. They have Washington next week for the Chicago Bears. That's a nice little matchup here. And so I think Roshan, as he continues to get more and more work behind Herbert, he could eventually take that job. This could be a good game for him next week as well. On the other side of that matchup as well, Antonio Gibson, he's just not getting the football. He's not getting the work. I don't think it'd be a great matchup for him or a great opportunity for him. Running back, it's really hard to go find guys off the waiver wire that you can just plug and play. A lot of these backup running backs are on rosters already for that very reason. Antonio Gibson, his roster percentage has been dropping. I've dropped him in a league or 2 already this year. But against Chicago, everybody is kind of in play potentially. The last one I want to mention is Justice Hill for the Baltimore Ravens, as well as Gus Edwards or even Melvin Gordon, depending on how the running back room shakes out there in Baltimore. But those guys are facing the Pittsburgh Steelers next week, and that could be a good matchup for running backs as it has been this season. A couple other guys I want to mention real quick, guys who are on rosters but could be trade targets because of their week 5 matchup. Josh Jacobs, he's got those Green Bay Packers we just saw last night, what David Montgomery did to those guys. Could be a great time, maybe your last chance to really buy low on Josh Jacobs. as this weekend they do have a very nice matchup with the Los Angeles Chargers, and then they've got the Green Bay Packers right after that. Also, the Miami Dolphins running backs, it's impossible to try to trade for those guys after they just went for as much as what they went for. But the good news is, if you paid up your money for Devin Achane, or if you just have them already, same with Raheem Mostert, should be continuing getting good work and should be continuing to get tons of fancy points. They've got the Giants in week 5. And then those Lions guys, specifically Jahmyr Gibbs, is the one who there could be a buy low window for. They have Carolina in week 5. So maybe you can pivot to him in a trade, and he could be a guy put straight into your lineup. At the wide receiver position, I've got a few names here for you to pick up and stash for next week. The headliner to me is Josh Downs, the rookie for the Indianapolis Colts. They face a very bad Tennessee Titans secondary next week. I think it's one that we could really see some success for Anthony Richardson through the air next week, which is exciting for Michael Pittman, but also for Joshua Downs. Next up is one that is going to give everybody a little bit of a headache. You're going to need a Tylenol for this, but it's the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. I didn't pick one name because it's going to depend on who's available in your league. Some leagues, Sky Moore is out there. Some leagues, Kadarius Toney's out there. Most leagues, Rashee Rice is out there. And I think Rice would be my pick of the group at this point to maybe try to get a plug-and-play guy in week 5 against the Minnesota Vikings. Sky Moore would probably be my second favorite, and then Kadarius Toney after that. Those are words I did not think I would ever say because I was a very big Kadarius Toney guy, and I still kind of am, but it's just such a rocky road with all those guys. But I think against this Minnesota Vikings secondary, Mahomes might have looked at those 70 points on the Dolphins and said, I want to beat that. And if he wants to, he could probably do it. The other guy I want to mention here is, once again, I swear I'm not a homer, even though the logo is right there over my shoulder, over both shoulders, as a matter of fact. The Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, Nelson Agholor. This is a good spot for Nelson Agholor. He's had a couple productive games in Baltimore so far, and they've got those Steelers. That defense is not looking great outside of literally just TJ Watt. We've seen some wide receivers have some success against them so far this season. They rank, I believe it was 29th versus wide receivers in non-PPR I saw earlier. So opportunity abound for the Baltimore Ravens pass catchers. In all actuality, that might just be a great thing for Zay Flowers. That's who I would target the most of the Ravens offense. But if you're desperate, you need a flex, you need a third wide receiver, Nelson Agholor could be a guy to pivot to get you help you get through some bye weeks. The tight end position, it's going to continue to just be a matter of rolling the dice and hoping you don't land on crap. But you probably will because it's tight end. My best suggestions, number one, again, he's not available in a lot of leagues, but he's been dropped a little bit, and that's Tyler Higbee. He is at Philly, who's been surprisingly not that good against tight ends so far through the first 3 weeks. Then I give you Adam Troutman of the Denver Broncos. They're facing the Jets, who have also not been good against tight ends so far this season. Next up is Hayden Hurst of the Carolina Panthers. They've got the Detroit Lions next week. And then head-to-head, Irv Smith Jr. Against Arizona and Zach Ertz versus Cincinnati. They're both streamable options next week. Lastly, but honestly, maybe most importantly when you're looking ahead at schedules, is defense and special teams. That Chicago-Washington game that I've mentioned a couple times is two teams that have kind of rough defenses. Well, guess what? They also have pretty bad offenses too. So it could be an opportunity to play guys against each side of that matchup. I should have mentioned Sam Howell, by the way, in the QBs to potentially pick up and stream in that matchup. That was an oversight on my part. Sam Howell is definitely a guy that you could pick up and play. I know I will. In one league where I have Herbert, I've already stashed away Howell for that week 5 match against the Bears. But I think both of those defenses could force some turnovers on some turnover-prone quarterback play on both Chicago and Washington. Next up is the Miami Dolphins defense. They've got the New York Football Giants, who have not been able to do much at all on offense so far this season outside of one second half against the Arizona Cardinals. Then you get the Denver Broncos. That's your weekly Zach Wilson free space. They have them. So even though the Broncos just gave up 70 points to the Dolphins, I do think Denver could be a streaming option purely because they're playing the Jets in week 5. Also, the Indianapolis Colts, they're playing the Tennessee Titans and those Detroit Lions that are going against the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young has only thrown for about 150 yards per game. It's not great. He's had a couple turnovers, as you would expect out of some rookies. So I think big things still in the works for Bryce Young as an NFL player in his career. just maybe not in week 5. So therefore, I think that the Detroit Lions defense could be an option for you. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me here today as we get set for week 4. Like I said, this is a bit of a look ahead, a bit of a preview for week 5, help you get through those bye weeks a little bit, help you try to find some moves that you can make now to help you out next week. But we are going to be right back here. Tanner's going to have his starts and sits and his rankings for you later on, either today or tomorrow. And we will see you guys then after week 4 is complete. I will have your recaps. I'll have your waiver wires, and we'll do it all again next week right here on the ADP.